There have been major changes in education since the 1800s. To understand how education has changed, one must take note of the historical, social, political, economic, industrial, global, and philosophical context of education in Australia. So let's get straight to the point. Each school situation has arrived as a series of historical events. So what was education like, say, 200 years ago? Firstly, the purpose of schooling was used as a tool for social order. Schools or schooling occurred in religious churches, sheds and barns, and teachers did not need any qualifications. School was for the privileged few, there were only white students in the classroom, and there was no curriculum, nor was school compulsory. Teachers used blackboards to teach the students and focused more on knowledge. There were no separate year levels, and public schools didn't happen until later on. Teachers used physical punishment as a consequence for discipline. So how has education changed or developed over time? Let's take a look at the social context of education. Today's classroom is more diverse than ever before. Teachers today are faced with students from a variety of socio-economic statuses and different cultural backgrounds. I call this the multicultural classroom because it offers students equal opportunities and combats stereotypes. Today's classrooms are separated by age. Teachers now not only work together with the students, but now parents are quite invested in their child's education. Let's take a look at the political context of education. In 1872, Victoria was the first of the Australian colonies to set up a central public school system based on the principles of free secular education. The Act also proclaimed that all children in Victoria between the ages of 6 and 15 were required to be educated. It wasn't until the 1950s where it was made compulsory that a child stay in school up until the age of 15. Moving on to the 1970s, the government developed a curriculum, and it wasn't until the 1980s that the government introduced the VCE certificate. Nevertheless, in the 1990s, training and education became compulsory for those who wanted to be teachers. It was also then that teachers and student expectations, responsibilities, and behavior policies were established. And this century, teachers working in schools are required by law to be registered by the Institute of Teaching. Also recently this century, the government had introduced VCAL. The government also launched the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority, meaning it improves learning for young Australians. However, ACARA has now moved toward the national curriculum. Also recently this century, the government announced AusVals, which is a curriculum that Victorian schools work to a set of guidelines which indicate what is crucial for a child to learn up until year 10. And currently the government introduced NAPLAN. Schools today have implemented values that establish the school culture, and only just students have been given the opportunity to set their own learning objectives. Today's purpose of schooling is about embracing the intellectual, emotional, social, moral, and physical developments of young people, preparing them to be effective citizens. What about the economic context? In the 1960s and 70s, the Menzies government established funding to all schools in Australia, including non-government schools, which before was privately funded. What followed in 1972, a committee elected by the Whitlam government was advised to inspect the financial position of all schools in Australia. The report acknowledged many inequalities in the funding system, which for the first time led to the federal government providing funding to the state schools. Another breakthrough was the Gonski report in 2011. The report found that too many children were being deprived of an education due to lack of resources. The report suggested that schools be funded according to the needs of their students, and a lot of the funding was to go to the public schools. Let's look at the industrial and global context. So in the 1980s and 90s, there was a major decrease in manufacturing. This had an effect on the education system as more and more young people wanted to stay in school. The surprise with this event was that more females wanted to be educated than males. Also in the 1990s, we also saw a growth in ICT in schools, which significantly changed education. The government is also now comparing Australian education systems to other school systems all around the world. Finally, let's look into the philosophical context. For years, philosophers have sought to understand the nature of learning. However, new and emerging theoretical frameworks assist to re-examine our experiences about teaching and learning. The learning theories such as motivational, behaviorist, cognitivist, humanism, and constructivism address not only how people learn, but describe how information is absorbed, processed, and retained during learning. So how does the classroom today look like? Today, students have the opportunity to work in collaborative groups. Students today are exposed to all sorts of ICT, such as computers, overhead projectors, smart whiteboards, and iPads. I call this the digital classroom. You literally have the whole world in just one room. Even though there is still some issues revolving education, I'm not worried. If so much has changed,
Created using Powtoon.